Welcome in to Gridiron Icon. It's Wednesday morning. We're going to talk some football as promised, have a little coffee, talk about the week that was, and then take a look forward to the week ahead, particularly the big matchup on Monday night between Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, the Rams versus the 49ers. First time they met this year. Likely to be a big story. Typically is. It's Niner week if you're a Ram fan. So there's lots and lots of emotions. We're going to talk a little bit about both of those guys coming off losses, which isn't as common for Sean McVay, becoming way too common for Kyle Shanahan. So let's talk about it because we got some questions. So welcome in again to Gridiron Icon. Let's take a quick look back at the week that was. Man, what a bizarre week in the NFL. Just as strange as they get. Although as you look back week after week, you start to realize that there's always a week or a weekend like this in the NFL. Nothing but upsets. Endless upsets, bizarre play, stars who didn't deliver. Just a weird one, man. Check the astrological chart because nobody has any clue what was going on this last weekend. So let's start with the Jags beating the Bills. I mean, shocking stuff that Urban Meyer went in and took out the Buffalo Bills. Nobody saw that one coming with the way the Jags have been playing. In fact, it was the seventh largest upset since 1990 against the spread. They closed as a 15.5-point underdog, 9-6. I mean, what we've seen out of this Buffalo Bills offense over the last year, at least, if not better, was that they were high-flying and could score from anywhere. They got up a whopping 6 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Nobody saw that coming. The weirdest thing about the entire game was that it was the Josh Allen versus Josh Allen Bowl, as the other Josh Allen, the defensive end, had a game for the ages, his best game as a pro, against Josh Allen, a guy that most of us thought would be in MVP talk for the NFL this year. Hit him with an interception, hit him with a sack, got a fumble. All in all, the Bills knocked out 4 sacks or allowed 4 sacks and gave up 3 turnovers. Bonkers, man. Nobody saw that coming against that Jacksonville Jaguar defense, which is a loose term when you take a look at them over this last season. So what a bizarre game and upset. And it's going to be really interesting to see where the Bills go from here. They've actually kind of struggled a little bit over the last couple of weeks, by their standards at least over the last couple seasons. So where do they go from here? They just laid an egg against the Jacksonville Jaguars and threw up a whopping 2 field goals. Absolutely nuts. Didn't stop there. We saw the Falcons with just a taped together roster at this point, although we got to give major props to Cordero Patterson and what he's doing playing 3 different positions in the league. Had a game again this last Sunday, but the Falcons walk in and steal one from the New Orleans Saints, who themselves are kind of going through a bit of a nightmare, losing Jameis Winston. They got quarterback issues. The season started and they literally had nobody to throw to. So now they go out, they get Mark Ingram back. He returns to New Orleans. He's teamed up with his buddy Alvin Kamara. And at this point, if you're a Saints fan, you got to be looking at this going, where are we going from here? We'll get into some of the rumors surrounding the Saints. But the Falcons with Matt Ryan, Kyle Pitts, a who's who, a totally different look at that term, roster, go in and steal one, showing that, again, it was one of those Sundays, any given Sunday. And we saw that in this game as well. Here's the next 2, though, just baffle me. And I'm guessing that most fans are feeling the same way. The Broncos go in and just kick the crap out of the Dallas Cowboys. That game was never close. If you watch that game, Teddy Bridgewater outduels Dak Prescott and that receiving core, which is insane when you think about it. Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, he had Zeke, he had Tony Pollard, he had all of his weapons, and the Cowboys look lost. This was in a week when people were starting to talk about Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, as a guy that may be in line for some head coaching gigs, maybe not at the pro level, but in college football. And then they went out and just stunk up the joint, not only on offense, but on defense, which from this fan's opinion, the Cowboys look lost on defense. The Jalen Smith cut continues to be kind of weird midseason. Kyle Vander Esch, you got to believe, is probably in his last season with the Cowboys. Micah Parsons flashed again, like he typically does with all that athletic ability. But the Cowboys just got rolled. They got rolled by the Denver Broncos, who themselves were coming off a bit of an emotional week. Their franchise pillar in Von Miller was traded to the Rams just days earlier. And I think everybody tuned in to see if maybe we were going to see a hangover out of the Broncos. Did not happen. The Broncos looked good, particularly in the running game with Javonte Williams, who I still say is going to be an absolute star in this league. And you just kind of walked away from that game going, what are the Dallas Cowboys? What have they been the last 2 to 3 seasons at this point? Is Mike McCarthy the guy? These aren't the kind of games you should be having in week 7, 8, 9 in the NFL when you're looking to wipe out the NFC East, perhaps even play for that home field advantage piece in the playoffs. And nobody can deny that Dak has come back really, really strong. Lots of respect for Dak Prescott. But that game was bizarre. And if you watched it, it almost looked at one point like the Cowboys just weren't interested. Just a complete shutdown of that offense with all those skill position players, and one of the strangest games of the weekend for sure. But let's move on to one of my favorite subjects, my team, which I am not shy about, my Los Angeles Rams, and the beatdown that they took on Sunday Night Football in front of the country from the Tennessee Titans. And make no mistake, folks, that was a beatdown. The Titans showed up and played smash mouth, blue collar, old school football. They got intense pressure from the middle of that defensive line with Simmons and his teammates literally collapsing the pocket on Brian Allen and the guards of the Los Angeles Rams. God, I almost said St. Louis right there. Can you believe that? And it didn't ever even look close in that game. Similar to that Broncos-Cowboys game, you've got a Los Angeles Rams team that is absolutely loaded at the skill positions with Woods and Kupp, Darrell Henderson, who's one of the better backs in the league, Tyler Higbee, who's one of the better tight ends. The Titans just rolled them. They came out and played smash mouth football on the Rams. And if you watch that game as a Rams fan, and I'm going to play that role because nobody that is a Rams fan seemingly, well, let me back up. There's a minority. If you're on Twitter, which is a dangerous place, people, but if you're on Twitter live tweeting during the game, you'll see that there's a minority of people that are starting to have some of the same questions that candidly I've had since last season. And those questions revolve around Sean McVay. Let's just get it out of the way right now. Okay? I like Sean McVay. The Rams are lucky to have Sean McVay. He has a brilliant offensive mind. But Rams fans, we've seen this before. We have seen this before. A brilliant offensive mind come into the franchise, have a dynamic offense in place. It starts setting records. It starts blowing up things, blowing up defenses. And then people start to catch up, particularly defensive coordinators. And I think, and I'm going to do it, the unpopular thing I'm going to throw out there, is it time to start questioning the way Sean McVay runs his offense? I've actually been questioning it since 2019, off and on. But now there isn't a Jared Goff to kick. There isn't a Todd Gurley. There isn't an offensive line that is somehow the problem, although they played terrible Sunday night, particularly in the middle of the lines. The 2 tackles by Pro Football Focus were rated very high, Whitworth and Havenstein, but the guards and center did not play well. They got killed. Is it time to start looking and at least questioning some of the habits, the tendencies, and the way Sean McVay runs this offense? I personally think it is. I'm calling it out. I know I'm not alone, although I know from Twitter at least and social media that I am in the minority. But it was on full display Sunday night with the Rams. Full display. McVay gets into these tendencies, these patterns, where he's having great success running the ball. And we're not even running the ball with Cam Akers, our starting running back. It's Darrell Henderson, who, by the way, is a big talent. Big talent. But he gets into these habits that are so painfully obvious. Watching him pick up 5, 6, 7 yards a play on first down with the running game, and immediately he moves into drop back passing, 5 receiver sets, empty backfields, and the other team knows it's coming. Folks, they know it's coming. The fans know it's coming. The honest fans who take a real look at this thing. Sean McVay has tendencies that I believe have been exposed. And it isn't a coincidence that these tendencies seem to have been exposed and played upon by head coaches and coordinators that come from the Bill Belichick New England Patriot coaching tree. How can this be ignored? Last season, the Rams got rolled by the Miami Dolphins. Brian Flores. Watch that game. Jared Goff was a train wreck with lots of zero blitzes. But Flores and that defensive staff seemed to know exactly what was coming from McVay, who calls that offense. That's his baby. And he was ready for it. We saw it the season before that, not in the Bears game with Fangio, which, of course, then McVay went out and got Brandon Staley from the Fangio coaching tree, which I thought was a brilliant move. Kudos to Sean. But prior to that, we saw Matt Patricia and the Detroit Lions literally script an entire defense around Sean McVay's tendencies. And it was at that point in that Lions game that this pattern that I'm seeing began. And we're seeing it particularly with coaches that come from the Belichick coaching tree. Folks, we've seen this before if you're a Rams fan. You've seen this. We saw Belichick do this to Mike Martz 20 plus years ago. They recognize the tendencies. They set up a defense. They know that they're going to slip right into their patterns. We have seen this before, and I believe history is repeating itself in this case. Look at the coaches that have had success against McVay. Patricia, who incidentally didn't win that game, but you look at that Detroit roster from a few seasons ago, it was the hot mess that Detroit is now. But he almost won that game. We've seen it with Brian Flores. We've seen Bill Belichick do it a couple of times now. It's most significantly in the Super Bowl. Good grief, man, was that a horrific Super Bowl. Rams fans can't even talk about it. But now we've seen Mike Vrabel do it on Sunday night. He was ready. He was running stunts with 4 men up front, right up the center of the pocket. Folks, we've seen this before if you're a Rams fan. And he knew that McVay would back away rather from the running game, which he does consistently, people. Come on now. He does it consistently. And he starts getting into that 11 personnel. He starts spreading it out with 5 receivers. He does a lot of eye candy for the defense. You notice the Titans who didn't buy it, just like the Patriots haven't bought it for seasons, just like the Lions at that time didn't buy it, just like the Dolphins didn't buy it. It's not a coincidence this seems to be happening under coaches from the Belichick coaching tree. And the rest of the league is going to key in on this now with Sean McVay. Fans can see it. Sorry, I know we're going to get into this. Okay, fans, what do you know? You're stupid. You know, the Twitter wars. NFL Twitter's a safe and fun place. But it doesn't take a genius to see what's going on. So I think it's time to start taking a look at McVay. Look, we're not going to get into the Goff versus Stafford stuff. That started to rear its ugly head almost immediately on Twitter Sunday night. However, there are some of us that say mortgaging all those draft picks, launching Goff without looking at some of the other elements, the other problems that seem to be a pretty steady pattern with Sean McVay was ignorant. I continue to say that was ignorant. The entire problems of the Rams the last 2 seasons did not revolve around Jared Goff, folks. He was one piece to that puzzle, one of a couple pieces. But responsibility ultimately has to go to the head coach, Sean McVay. So again, I want to say lucky to have him. Brilliant offensive mind. But like every mad scientist, he has weaknesses. He has patterns and tendencies that now seem to be getting exposed by teams that have the book on him, so to speak. So it's going to be really interesting. And by the way, we're not saying anything that Sean McVay did not say post-game or in the 2 days following up. If you've watched his interviews, he's mentioned this. Look, I didn't put, and we've heard his speech before. He just rolls it out. It's verbatim every week. But there seemed to be a bit of recognition on his part over the last couple of days that he got into some ugly patterns. He put Stafford in some weird spots. Now, Stafford did not play well. Let's just get that out of the way right now. Stafford was miserable. And we could do an entire episode of this podcast on, Lions fans. Have you seen this before? The streaky gunslinger that all of us recognize as an epic talent physically, is a tough guy, is a good guy. But we've seen this before, where he goes on these streaks where it just looks like a hot mess and you'd have no idea. That game Sunday night out of Stafford was just bizarre. That was a bizarre game from him. Unless you've been a Lions fan for 10 plus years and you've seen this before. I think if you take a balanced approach to what he did Sunday night, you'd say, I mean, here's the thing. Can we really not be concerned at all with McVay and Stafford in that relationship? I'm concerned. I'm just going to admit it. Now, they got time to work this out. They've got talent. Both of them are really good guys and smart guys and talented guys. But we're not going to be able to fall into our old patterns, whether you're the quarterback or the head coach and expect to win a Super Bowl this year. And let's face it, Rams fans, this is it. They've mortgaged all the draft picks. They've mortgaged the future, whether people want to get into the funny stuff with Les Snead or not. The bottom line is they are all in. So they've got, what do they have? 6-8 weeks to figure this out. And they really don't have that because they really need to shoot for home field advantage. They need to win the NFC West, and the Cardinals are nothing to laugh at. They are real. They have loaded that roster with talent, particularly team speed. So, Rams fans, weird game Sunday night. Titans come in, all the credit to Tennessee. Love Mike Vrabel and his blue-collar culture that he's built there. They're tough up front. They're tough on both lines of scrimmage. And I thought the Titans just showed out. And they're not without their own challenges. Losing King Henry and going on the road and winning one is, man, tip your hat to them. The Titans came and rolled them. Period. The score ended up looking somewhat respectable. It wasn't that close. Those were garbage time numbers at the end in the fourth quarter. So some concerns for Rams fans. We're going to talk more about that on this episode as we look forward to Monday night. I just want to give a shout out to this week to Baker Mayfield. Look, love him or hate him, I don't take it personal with these guys. I think Baker's a gunslinger. I think he's every man that never made it. He plays over his skis. He's not particularly the most talented, but man, does that guy believe in himself. And I think you got to tip your hat to him. I'm a Baker Mayfield fan as a football player, that is. And to go through what he's gone through, being called out by OBJ's family and all these stupid social media. Look how he won't throw to my son. Folks, kudos to him. He comes out, there's 218 yards, 2 TDs, has an 82.7 quarterback rating against the Bengals, who are an up-and-coming team. They, too, are talented. They hit a rough patch. They got hammered by the Browns, frankly. But Baker Mayfield, kudos to you, man. You came out and played ball. And folks, didn't he look more relaxed? He looked a lot more relaxed. He looked like he just said, look, I'm going to be me. I don't have to force the ball into OBJ anymore, and I'm just going to be me. So just a quick tip of the hat to Baker Mayfield and the Browns, who I still think are going to be a problem if they get in the playoffs. They've just got too much talent on that roster, and I think that they're gelling. They're coming together. So let's get into a segment I call Things We Saw This Weekend. And I kind of just did that, but I want to talk a little bit about Kyle Shanahan. And this is timely with our thoughts on McVay and Shanahan as they are set to meet Monday night on Monday Night Football. My question is this, whether you're a 49er fan or just a fan of the NFL, is Kyle Shanahan in trouble? Should he be? His record at this point on this season with that roster is 3-5. That's a surprise, no matter how you crack it up. People had them as a contender in the NFC West. They had them as a contender over the Arizona Cardinals, and the Cardinals have proved this all wrong. They look great. Even without Kyler Murray, they look good. So Shanahan's sitting there at 3-5. But you start to look back at his 4 to 5 years now in San Francisco, he has a collective record of 31-39. Don't want to hear the injury talk. That Niners team rolled the Rams and McVay. They swept them last year, 2-0. They had nobody. All those studs on the defensive line at the time, their DBs were beat up, although they had Richard Sherman. They've had injuries, but his offense, which is predicated on the running game, he seems to have plug-and-play running backs anytime he wants one, was on full display last year. But his collective record is 31-39 now. Take away the Super Bowl season, which you could arguably say they choked in the Super Bowl. I don't think it's much of an argument. But is Kyle Shanahan in trouble? Should he be? I think my problem with Shanahan at this point, and I think everybody's talking about it at this point, isn't so much his time as a coach, although he too, and isn't this interesting? Him, LaFleur, McVay, these guys all come from the same world. They're all friends in the offseason. They come from the same coaching staff. Those guys were under Shanahan with the Washington football team, Redskins at the time. Isn't it interesting that they all seem to fall into tendencies that the league seems to be picking up? But I don't want to go down the coaching rabbit hole with Shanahan. I want to talk about his role in the front office, because that's where I think he's starting to be exposed. And we've seen this before in the NFL, coaches who think they should run the front office as well. It almost never seems to work, ever. Go ahead and throw some examples at me that have been wildly successful. But Shanahan has taken ownership of that roster. He has had major impact on that roster. And when you look at what he's done from a personnel standpoint, you have to be real concerned with what he's done, because it doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good. Let's take a review. Most of us will remember a few years back when he just had to have Joe Williams, the running back. Wasn't even on the draft board. Did what all coaches do, started slamming the table wanting Joe Williams in the 4th round. Joe Williams never played a down for the 49ers. And that seems to be where this pattern began. He started to have so much say on the personnel side of the team. And I think that's where the problems are starting and may end for Shanahan in San Francisco. So you're looking at Joe Williams. Then he goes up, trades up in 2018, had to have Dante Pettis, who was a complete bust for the 49ers, barely saw the field. He's now on a roster backing up. And you look at Shanahan, who's supposed to be an offensive guru. So at that point, he's busting on Joe Williams. He's busting on Dante Pettis. We're not even going to get into Brandon Ayuk, because I still think there's time. And he had a pretty good game this last Sunday. But he's not developing. And again, we're talking about somebody, Kyle Shanahan, that most people feel is an offensive guru, that he's going to develop people. He took Matt Ryan to the next level when he was with the Atlanta Falcons, got him an MVP. But we're not seeing that in San Francisco. So Joe Williams, Dante Pettis, Brandon Ayuk. Do we even want to talk about Jalen Hurd, who is out of college was essentially a running back that he was converting to a receiver at the NFL level, went out and got him in the 3rd round in 2019. The guy's barely seen the feet. He's busted up again, whether it's a knee, It's a back. It's probably likely, and you want to root for Jalen Hurd. Everybody does on the human level, but is he ever going to make it in the NFL? It's not looking good. He's not coming back this year. So again, Williams, Pettis, Ayuk, Hurd. Let's talk about Trey Sermon. They made a trade with the Rams to come up and get Trey Sermon out of Ohio State. And he is at best right now on the 49er roster, fifth string. Meanwhile, sixth-round rookie Elijah Mitchell is holding down the starting job. What's happened here? The quarterback, running back, skill position guru, Kyle Shanahan, is busted on 4 or 5 players. Then they go out in the second round. They had to get a guard, so they go out and get Aaron Banks. He's been a healthy scratch more often than not on Sundays. Meanwhile, he's got veterans like Daniel Brunskill and Tom Compton have passed over the hopeful second-round guard, Aaron Banks. So now we're moving into offensive line play. McGlinchey is hurt again. We could go on and on about some of this. But my point being, is it time to start being a little more candid about Kyle Shanahan? The same way I stated about Sean McVay? Both of those guys have a lot of say about their rosters. McVay has built a fantastic culture in Los Angeles, although with the Deshaun Jackson thing this last week or so, and some of the vets in the past, the Clay Matthews, the Todd Gurley's, there may be some stuff that comes out in the future that isn't as favorable about that culture, the me, not we thing. But Shanahan, the same thing in San Francisco. People felt that he would bring a winning culture, him and John Lynch. And folks, we just haven't seen it. Both of those coaches have gone to Super Bowls. Both of them lost the Super Bowls. And this thing with personnel, and okay, I'm going to throw this thing in here right now. I cringe every Sunday when I see how well Creed Humphrey is playing at center for the Kansas City Chiefs, a guy that's probably going to be a 10-year Pro Bowler. And we left him on the board for 155-pound wide receiver Tutu Atwell, who barely saw the field, got knocked down fielding punts, not by players, but by the ball, got knocked down and is now injured. It seems as though this pattern with some of these folks from that, some of the guys, the coaches from that coaching tree, is there's starting to be a little bit of a spotlight on it. And so we're going to call it out. We're just going to call it out. Let's talk about it. Is Shanahan in trouble? He and McVay will meet this Monday night for a Monday night football battle. And look, they both need to win. They both really need to win. If McVay goes down and loses to the Niners again, which was really getting swept by them, that probably got Jared Goff shipped out of town last season, aside from the Jets and Dolphins game, losing to his buddy, Kyle Shanahan, whose roster was completely depleted, was probably more than McVay could handle. If he goes into this year in their first meeting on a national stage again Monday night after basically choking Sunday night, that's what it was. They didn't show up. But if he goes into Monday night and loses to Kyle Shanahan, his buddy, who is sitting there at 3-5 and is desperate, let's be honest, he's desperate. They lose Monday night, they're probably out of it. They're out of it for the NFC West, in the very least, but probably out of the playoffs. This is almost a do or die for both guys. Now, McVay's not in danger. That's not what I'm saying. But if he goes in and lays an egg against Shanahan again on Monday night, Stafford doesn't play well, and Shanahan beats him again, folks, there's going to be a lot of Twitter fodder on Tuesday morning. It's not going to be good. Monday night, there's going to be a lot of us that won't be sleeping. So this is a big matchup coming Monday night. We've got Shanahan, whose back is against the wall. People are starting to question his future in San Francisco. We've got McVay, whose patterns and tendencies seem to be exposed at this point and wants to beat his good friend and mentor in a lot of ways after laying an egg himself on Sunday night. So big game Monday night. Most people in the national media probably aren't going to see it that way, not sure. But I think that if you're a fan of either team, you're probably looking at this Monday night matchup and you're thinking, what a battle of the giants, so to speak, in the NFC West, because both of these squads under these guys were picked to win the NFC West, both by different pundits. Different people thought it'd be them. No one saw the Cardinals coming. Most people looked at the Seahawks and thought that in a lot of ways their window was closing. So these two were odds-on favorites in a lot of people's eyes. And both of them really need this win. It's not a cliche. Had McVay won Sunday night and was rolling, losing Monday night would have stung probably on a personal level somewhat. But it's not going to be the same as losing two in a row. Losing on Sunday night, losing Monday night. Shanahan needs this, folks. If you're a 49ers fan, give me your opinion. I mean, he needs this win. If he can beat McVay and the Rams, the Niners are on the edges of being back in the hunt. So must win for Shanahan. In some ways, depending how you define it, must win for Sean McVay. He's got to put that nasty Titans game in the back, in the rearview mirror. And he's got to show that this team is for real. So really interesting game coming up Monday night. Here is my prediction. Here we go. I know this is going to shock everybody. I'm going to take the Rams. And frankly, I think the Rams are going to destroy them. I think that McVay will come out. He will be angry about what happened Sunday night. I think the players will be angry. Rams-Niners week is always big. And I just got a feeling, and of course being swept last season is still just not making him happy. He has not forgotten. So I think McVay comes out. I think we may see something really ugly, like a 38-10, 38-14 type game. And I think the Rams are going to win this one. And again, the only thing that makes me uncomfortable about that is it's going to quiet maybe some of the stuff that people are starting to realize about McVay's tendencies. I'd like to see Sean maybe come out in this game and wipe that out, quiet that talk, stomp it out, because it's clear that he has some of it. So here's my prediction for Monday Night Football. I think the Rams will come out maybe 38-10, 38-14. And I think at that point, one of the big stories for the season will be Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. What's going on in San Francisco? It's already begun, but if they come out and get hammered by a division rival, I think it's going to be in full force. And people were going to cut. Poor Kyle Shanahan's going to be a top name trending on Twitter, which doesn't say much in our society anymore, but I think that's where it's at. One other quick preview as we close out our Wednesday musings over coffee. Cleveland at New England, I think that's an interesting game. Can Baker keep it going? Wouldn't it be fascinating? At the time of this recording, it is early in the day, Wednesday. Wouldn't it be something if OBJ lands in New England? I don't see it. The report is that OBJ has narrowed it down to the Saints, Packers, and Seahawks, which is also weird. I don't know why any of those teams outside of the Saints would pull the trigger on that. But can Baker keep it going in New England? I kind of see Baker and Mac Jones somewhat similar. So it's going to be interesting to see what Belichick has in store for Baker. And of course, the big news that Nick Chubb and Felton, who have both tested positive for COVID, may not even play. So, and Kareem Hunt's already injured. So, wow, here we go. We're going to find out what the Cleveland Browns are all about mid-season. And you really want to see that defense carry the team. Really a solid roster filled with talent on the defensive side of the ball. Okay, Cleveland, here's your time. You've got a quarterback who's a bit of a gunslinger. He can game manage. Let's see what the Browns do against the New England Patriots. I'm going to pick the Browns in just an ugly game. I'm thinking 13-7. And I think Baker will start to get a little bit of respect. People will start to talk a little bit more about the Browns as a contender in the AFC, even more so than they are. So that's it, folks. Thanks for anything and everything. For those that are listening and following, we'd certainly appreciate if you subscribe. You can find us on all the podcast networks, all the usual suspects, but subscribe, like on YouTube, follow us on social media. Give us your thoughts. We love contrarians. Let's argue in a healthy way, not on NFL Twitter, unless that's your thing. But thanks again for tuning in this week at Gridiron Icon. Of course, you can find us at gridironicon.com as well. Thanks again. We will see you soon. Enjoy the football.